understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged.
If you're listening to this, you are the resistance. The resistance.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
It's a trap!
All right, my young conservative and libertarian friends, all of you listening today, got a very special guest. She is young, she's beautiful, she's freedom-loving. We actually just refer to that as conservative. She's Lila Rose, and she is the #1 freedom fighter in the anti-death movement of young humans. Lila, welcome to the show.
Hi, TJ. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, hell yeah, is the name of the show. I'm excited to chat with you. I think my wife was even more so because she has so much respect for your sting operation at Planned Parenthood. She did tell me she would be super nervous about the getup. She's like, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable being on video as like a pretend hooker. I probably want to stand in the background and just have the words dubbed in so nobody could see me. So I'm supposed to ask you if you had any reservations about that. Like, did you have to work out, do the beach body thing, or did you just jump right in there?
Well, we actually, to make it super authentic, we had somebody posing as a pimp with his bottom girl, and that actually wasn't me. We did a whole setup where I retired from undercover work in one sense a few years ago because they have my photo up now on the walls of Planned Parenthood clinics, abortion clinics. So since then, when we did the sex trafficking investigation, we actually used, we worked with contractors who posed as the pimp and the prostitute.
Do you miss it at all? Like, do you look back the old days and go, man, I wish I could be a prostitute again. That was so much fun.
No, not, I mean, it seems, I think, to the outside world, sometimes it might seem exciting, and there is an excitement element to it, but it's hard work because you're actually taking on the identities of real people or seeking to take on the identities of real scenarios, I should say, and that, it's stressful. You're in an abortion clinic. These places are horrible. They're, abusive to women. They kill children. So it's not like walking through Disneyland.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And as you're describing what you do, I'm like, you're kind of like an actress. I feel like there should be an Oscar awards for people who, instead of giving your money to Hollywood, you go back and you get it back from DC. You're like an actress in exact reverse. There should be an Oscars for that. What are we going to call it? What kind of award are you going to get?
I don't know. I mean, it's human rights work. So, but more than having an award made, I would prefer that people just honored the thought or honored the movement by joining it. I mean, that's the best way to beat this thing and to make an impact in protecting lives. So, but it's a nice thought.
I think there's a couple things we could do. We could either populate the award show with like all the children that survived the botched abortion and didn't live in a state where Barack Obama had implemented like the double trouble laws where someone else had to come in and finish the execution. Or we could leave all the seats empty in honor of all the children that had been killed by the policies of bad people. There's a lot of ways we could go with this. And I'm not trying to be lighthearted. It's going to get more serious as we go. But I think that...
Yeah, TJ, I don't envy you right now because this is, I mean, the issue that we're talking about is, I think it's the greatest human rights issue of our day. It's extremely weighty for a lot of people. So anyways, but good. Those are very valiant attempts at jokes.
Well,
so
here's the thing, like...
A for effort.
You have to understand in my world, so the craziest thing is, like, I would typically ask when you decided to become like a right-wing, crazy, nut job, bigoted, anti-woman person. Because at some point you made the decision. Like, you could just go along and not give any thought to the fact that there are real human, I could call it human sacrifice, which is it is, but human cost to these policies and the fact that people don't think about what they're doing. Or you can stop and think and make a decision and say, you know what, is this something that's worth fighting for? Is it something that's worth defending? Is it something that I'm actually going to get involved in and put my own human capital behind and pursue as a cause? But the problem is it's you talk about a dangerous road or a place that's difficult to go. Like, I always ask the guests, when did you decide to be this horrible person who spends your life in pursuit of a cause that you believe in? When you could just go along and be a lemming and not give it a second thought and root for people who say things like, hey, women's rights and women's health and all that other claptrap nonsense.
Yeah, well, first of all, as anyone listening might relate to, when they've done the difficult thing, when they've done the thing that seems to go against the status quo, seems to go against just the mass media, non-thinking, sometimes even non-truly feeling what is happening in our country sports, is that it's something that's very freeing. So when I was a teenager, I started live action when I was 15 and 26 now. And I did it because I wanted to do something meaningful with my life. I think everybody does. We're all created for a purpose. I firmly believe it. There are no accidents. And we are born for a time, a certain time in human history for a purpose. And when I was really getting to understand kind of current events, and when I was actually very young, I was starting to get a feel for what abortion was. I started to study it. I had this encounter when I was growing up, around 9 years old, with abortion that really initially piqued my interest. And I thought, this is something that is attacking the weakest in our country. This is something that is disturbing and really ripping apart the most intimate human relationships between men and women, and the child, who should be the most protected in our country, that little girl or boy, is instead being treated as a cast out, someone that can just be destroyed. And all of that, and coming across the statistics, I mean, TJ, it's crazy, but since abortion became legal in this country in 1973, over 55 million children have been killed. 55 million preborn children have been killed. And that number is more than all of our American wars combined. Obviously more than all of the lives lost, American lives lost in all the wars we've been involved in combined. And the numbers are growing every day. So coming to know about this, I did resolve that I had to do something about it.
So I think it's pretty incredible what you've accomplished at a young age. Like, just to put it in perspective, you're 11 years into this, whether you want to call it a cause or an experiment or this mission that you're on. If you had decided to be a community organizer and you ran for the Senate 11 years ago, like, you would already be done with your second presidential term and on to like community organizing again. That's how long you've been doing this.
Yeah. I mean, that I have. It's been most of my adult life, or it's been all of my adult life. Sorry, and almost half of my life I've been actively involved in this cause. So yeah, I mean, I started literally canvassing my neighborhood at 13 years old, putting out flyers that said, "I'm too young to vote for the protection of the right to life, but you are. So please be my vote." So I mean, I guess in one sense, community organizing, I did start at a very young age.
So
you got to do what you got to do. I mean, everybody can make a difference. Never think you're too young or too old to get involved in changing your community and spreading the truth. And I strongly felt that as a young teen, that I had to make a difference, that I had it within my power by just getting out there and talking to people. And that's how it all started.
Now, I want to give you kind of my background as an average guy who wasn't always political, who didn't always feel as strongly as I do now about this topic and others. And part of what changed me, you've kind of given your background, is that I realized so much of what people think is true is based on a lie that they were told by someone who had something to gain by deceiving them. And that's kind of the full focus of the show, is that most people believe what they do because of a combination of truths and lies, and their inability to determine between the two, or their inability to see or care how it affects them personally, right? So with that as the foundation, I want to go to actually two people that I know that I was in the same room with, and on different days, I had experiences. One where I would just start talking about abortion for no reason except that maybe we had nothing else to talk about, and I just like to talk and debate and kind of explore ideas. The other one was someone that I almost recently mentioned I was going to speak to you about, and this young lady didn't know who you were, so I kind of went into it, and I got both of their reactions on how they felt about abortion. And I'm fascinated by this because these are both good people who I care about very much, who I like, who I enjoy being around, and they're just, they've never given it a second thought. And I gave away the punchline already. The first one was a gentleman who said, yeah, my mom, she's kind of a crazy, she's got these strong opinions, she thumps her Bible, whatever. But he's like, things that don't even matter, like abortion. That was the first one that came out. And then he said, are you like, do you make a big deal about abortion? I mean, it's really not a big deal. And I'm like, what do you mean it's not a big deal? He goes, just like people get so hung up about it. And my reaction to him was, when you go to Canada, and Lila, I'm sure you've been to Canada, and they put like the pictures of people that look like the Walking Dead on the cigarette boxes, like the missing jaws and the lung cancer.
Yep, and in Europe. Yep.
And they, I don't know how effective it is, but the one thing that comes out of that is people can see that and go, oh, this is what happens when you smoke. Okay, well, I have a visual association. So I told him, if you were able to see a typical abortion procedure at 24 weeks, if you were able to hear it, have it described, see what people go through, see what happens afterwards, it would change your mind. But you don't, and all you know is the euphemistic term abortion, which isn't really very descriptive. Like, they don't call it chemical incineration. They don't call it tongal dismembership. I'm making
ripping
these
and
up.
tearing apart.
Yeah, they don't call it evisceration. They don't call it child sacrifice. Like, that's actually a pretty accurate term for what it is. They call it abortion. I call it like, I'm going to abort my plans for this weekend, or I'm playing a video game and I got to abort the mission. Like, totally separate, kind of waters it down. That's how you got here, friend. Let me explain this to you. And I had a similar experience with the other friend. Actually, I started describing like Tony Levantino's description of what an abortion actually does, like pulling out parts of the body one by one. And she started to get visibly ill and said, I actually want to Google it because I didn't know that's what happened. Like, I don't even believe that. That's too hard to believe. I'm like, bingo. There you go. That's all it took. That little conversation of, guess what? This whole thing, you had no opinions about your whole life. Someone lied to you. Someone hid the truth. And now you've had your first taste of reality. We're getting somewhere.
Well, historically, TJ, it's amazing that there have been Holocaust deniers, right? And they wouldn't believe what had happened to millions of Jews in Nazi Germany until they saw literally pictures of emaciated dead Jews stacked up who had been slaughtered, or they saw pictures of the torture done to some of the Jewish people. I mean, this is not a new thing that people deny the injustice happening sometimes in their midst, or not just a continent away. And when it comes to abortion, it has a particularly vicious strain of hiding itself because it's something that's very intimate. It's something that's been in our country legally for over 40 years. It's something that happens over 3,000 times a day. It's something that even for the vast majority of abortions, which are done on children in the first trimester, are killing children who have a heartbeat, are killing children with a detectable brainwave. By the end of the first trimester, the child has all of its internal organs. You can see arms, legs, a newly formed little face. It just needs time and nourishment to grow and those organs to start working so it can ultimately one day be born and be viable. So it's incredible that when people have an encounter with what abortion does to that victim, to the child, then they change their minds and then they are shocked and disgusted. And when we let Live Action actually give people encounters with the humanity of the child, showing that a first trimester section abortion literally is a suction machine inserted into the woman 40 times as powerful as a household vacuum that literally rips the child, not just in amniotic fluid sac, not just from the uterus, but rips the child in pieces by forcing it through a tiny tube and into a garbage receptacle, basically. And sometimes if it's late first trimester, early second, they have to make sure they got all the pieces out because sometimes they can miss pieces, especially if they're going in there with a curette, a sharp edge at the end of that vacuum to make sure they can cut up the child if it's early in the second trimester, the bones are starting to develop. So you actually have to rip that child apart to make it fit through that tube. I mean, once you actually talk about this, once you actually have the courage to look at it, to witness it in one sense, to see the victim, everything changes. Because you no longer can use the euphemism, which is ultimately abortion, of just saying it's ending a pregnancy, it's a termination. All of a sudden, it's a real human life. It's a human being, a tiny little boy or girl that's being destroyed savagely. And you go into the later term abortions, and it's even more obvious how savage that destruction is. Physically obvious. It's obvious to the eye. And ethically, it's always a destruction of a life, and it's an attack against a human person. And all of a sudden, it changes everything. So the best thing that those that are in the pro-abortion camp can do, whether they're Democrats or whether they're rhino Republicans who are pro-abortion and pushing that agenda behind the scenes to fund abortion groups like Planned Parenthood, is they can hide that fact, the fact of what abortion does to a child. And that's the only way the pro-abortion movement has succeeded at all in our country, is by hiding the ugly, disgusting truth of what they do to children and all the other ways that they're actually harming women, which is a whole other conversation. And that's the only way that they can succeed, and that's what they desperately try to do every day.
In the second conversation that I mentioned, and this is, honest friend number one, the first thing she said was, yeah, but why would people do that if they know that? Why would someone go in and have that procedure done if they know? I'm like, well, you're under the premise that they understand. Like, they're getting lied to. And your video exposed this. They tell people it doesn't. And I have a stack of articles here. Doctor said it doesn't hurt. Doctor said there's no pain. Doctor said there'll be no, emotional recourse. I mean, you're just coming in, you're getting your temperature taken, you're getting weighed, and you're out of here. It's not a big deal. You got to go to Cancun this weekend. You got to get rid of that baby. And it's kind of sick how glossed over it is. But for me, it's not sick because people are doing it. I believe that there are wise people, evil people, and foolish people. I believe that it's the foolish let me go back. She said, you know what? Do you have any sympathy for the women that go in there and they have their children killed? Like, it's their fault. I said, well, if they know the truth, like if people listen to the show and you hear the truth from someone who's speaking truth, and then your decision is unchanged and you're not moved by that, that's a separate conversation. If you don't know the truth, different story. You need to learn it and then make up your mind about what's really going on. And as I read through, like I said, the stack of papers I have here about people who go through it and have these terrible experiences. And, I'll just run through some names. Charlotte Dawson, good one. Anthony Levantino, Bernard Nathanson. And I'd like you to input some more stories because I'm sure you have a ton of them. People whose lives were totally changed, in some cases tragically ended because they bought into this lie that it just wasn't a big deal. It's a clump of cells. It's some hair and some skin, and it's just an inconvenience, bottom line.
TJ, exactly what a comment you just made about your friend saying, well, what about women? What about helping women? And as a woman, it absolutely makes me feel the outrage and realize the hypocrisy of those that claim that abortion is empowering to women. Because think about it. What do abortion advocates say? What do abortion clinic owners and Planned Parenthood lobbyists believe? They say, at least they say it, I don't know if they secretly maybe don't believe it, but that it's your body, your choice, right? My body, my choice, your body, your choice.
Hands off my body.
And what are you actually saying when you say that? You're saying to every pregnant woman, whether she's the victim of rape and incest, whether she's a college student who's trying to get through class, whether she's in business trying to get a promotion, whether she's married and trying to deal with a relationship, or she has a boyfriend who she's trying to deal with, or she's in a situation of sexual abuse, you're saying to all those women that if you get pregnant, it's your body, deal with it. You're completely severing society's responsibility, the responsibility of men, the responsibility of universities or of employers who might be dealing with women who are pregnant. You're completely severing their responsibility out of the picture and saying it's the woman's responsibility. And the rape and incest victim, instead of it being a situation where look for adoption options for her, look for healing from the trauma that she experienced and endured at the hands of the rapist, instead it's get an abortion. It's your body, your choice. And that's where society has been selling, these pro-abortion groups has been selling an extreme bill of lies to women all across the country. And it makes me outraged for women because we've been lied to by saying, first of all, biologically it's incorrect. It's not just my body. There's another body inside of my body. And ethically speaking, and speaking from a human rights perspective, you're completely shutting out society's responsibility and men's responsibility and everyone else's responsibility except the woman who's in a situation of abuse, pressure, fear, isolation, and it's extremely anti-woman, which is why all these women's advocacy groups, so self-named groups like NARAL and NOW, National Organization for Women, and a lot of these foundations created for women's reproductive freedom or women's advancement completely have it wrong. And that is the message we're trying to get out, that yes, we believe in empowering women. We believe in equal treatment of women. We believe in women being able to realize their potential, but the way to that is not through the destruction and the violence, the indignity of abortion.
It's funny, I actually met an abortion activist on the street the other day trying to get signatures, and this hadn't happened to me ever. Like, I live in the Phoenix area in Arizona. You just don't see a lot of that. And I walked up and I'm like, and she's like, hey, you want to support women's rights and women's right to healthcare and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, that's actually funny, women's access to healthcare. Like, because healthcare is everyone's business. Like, I'm responsible. We're a social compact. You hear these liberal memes, right? It's a social compact and we're collectivists and we're all in this together and we're one big family ad nauseum. But as soon as it comes to an abortion, it's nobody's business but the woman's, and she's got to get rid of the baby. Like, the baby has to go. And actually, with my first friend I talked about, he goes, what's the solution? If you get raped or if you don't want the baby, what do you do? I'm like, I don't know for every individual instance. I just don't understand why the default is the baby has to die. Like, why is that the first place that we go? Like, the first worst.
Well, first of all, exactly. I mean, first of all, you have to create boundaries. Society, my rights end where another person's rights begin. Science and reason tell us this is a human being. Society has created, in the human history and in the American history, the greatest injustices have been perpetuated because we have dehumanized or called non-persons. Blacks were called only 3/5 of a person, and we fought a civil war over it. I mean, when are we going to stop pretending that certain populations are not people? And that's what we've done with the preborn in this country. The whole population, we created an arbitrary line of birth, the birth canal, and all of a sudden that human life has personhood once he or she is breathing the air and she's born. And that whole construct is why our law is unjust at its core. And because we try to accommodate that in our society by the way we approach women and treat pregnancy and treat childbearing, we have created an incredibly imbalanced and abusive system against women. And it's also been a huge letting off the hook of men, claiming that this is actually empowering women. But what it's done is it's made men more powerful. Now women, we have to compete in the workforce, compete at universities, compete in even politics. And if we're pregnant, it's your body, your choice. So you deal with it. We're equal in dignity, but we're different from men. Society doesn't want to respect that or honor that. And so we're expected to compete and deal directly the way that men do. But at the same time, we're the ones who have to raise and carry children. And yet that's not respected about us. And it's certainly not protected about us. And that's why this whole meme about being pro-women and being pro-abortion is a lie.
That's why you got a village. Can't be bothered with raising those kids. Man, I'm glad my wife is not here. She'd be ranting and raving. I got to keep it under control. Now I've got
a village.
Yeah, you got to pursue the career so you can have a village.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, let the village raid Chelsea Clinton. You got better things to do. Like track your husband down in the middle of the night. Let's see. The thing I have here, and I actually just thought of this, I kind of want to break it down to sections because this is your area of expertise. You've been doing this since you were essentially a child. And there's a couple really important takeaways for people who aren't as versed in the topic and who haven't kind of seen through the lies that were sold. You touched on the first one. My taxes are everyone's business. My healthcare is everyone's business. There are 5 or 6 intrusions the government has into your life every single day that it's because it's a shared responsibility. And you've already pointed out why abortion doesn't fall into that category. That's no one's business. We just have to support it. So I want to talk about the support issue. It all ultimately comes down to money. And, this whole thing with Kermit Gosnell is coming out. I'm going to have the producers of that movie come on and talk about, what he's doing and how much money he made. But ultimately, the thing that really gets me about abortion is Planned Parenthood and the fact that I support it against my will. And there's nothing I can do about it short of, pulling a John Galt. How much money is there in this dirty industry of death? Well,
the numbers are shocking. And if you care at all about big government, which I'm imagining many people listening do, as they should.
But they're only mad about the military and how much money we waste in all the wars, overseas conflict.
Cut the military, cut Homeland Security, but do not cut the abortion industry.
Because
they are an essential government program.
Right.
I mean, that is the position. That has been the position of our administration. It's disgusting.
When they say cut the fat, I literally think of abortion. I'm like, oh, okay, cut a human being.
I mean, it's the go-to. But, let's call a spade, though. It's not just President Obama. Under President Bush, we had 4.5 years of a technically controlled House and Senate, and yet we funded the abortion industry every year. Tens of millions of dollars.
How much? How much is it? What was their profit last year? How much money did they raise? How big is the industry?
Last year, Planned Parenthood reported about a $1.2 billion budget, and over $500 million came from the government. So state and federal, largely federal money, our taxpayer dollars funneled into abortion clinics. We're talking about this is over $500 million. So in the last 10 years, we're talking about billions of dollars, literally, that have gone directly to the nation's biggest abortion chain. And some people, TJ, say, well, Planned Parenthood is not an abortion chain. They're doing all these other things. Planned Parenthood is the biggest abortion provider in the country. They kill over 320,000 children a year. 320,000. And 40% of their clinic income is from abortion. So they literally have abortion clinics set up across the country that are solely surgical centers, where if you call them seeking a pap smear or you call them seeking, as Planned Parenthood claims, to provide women's wellness exams, instead they say, no, we just have surgical equipment, or we're just focused on abortion at this facility. So that is Planned Parenthood's focus as an organization. As far as their surgeries are concerned, it's abortion, it's killing children. And when it comes to their political work, and they're one of the biggest lobbyists for abortion, they are the biggest political proponent right now for abortion.
Let's talk about, you mentioned Bush and then you said Obama. Now, I want to talk about Obama because, you know, he's cool and he's collected and he's smart and he's clean and articulate and black. And he's just like, he's basically the perfect human being, like the perfect specimen of perfection in a politician. We know that because we get reminded of that constantly. Although I don't hear that as much anymore from my crazy liberal friends. But the one thing that really gets them riled up, aside from Tea Partiers, Sean Hannity, and well, I had another one I can't say on the air.
And Christians.
Yeah, Christians, like those
religious liberty.
The Christian
really
Crusades really pissed him
liberty.
off. But
yeah, exactly.
But aside from the
He's
Crusades,
still smarting over the Christian Crusades, which, by the way, fact check. The Christian Crusades were done not for vainglory or riches, but they were to protect Christian pilgrims whose land had been overrun by radical militant Islamists and who were being martyred and persecuted. That's what the point of the Christian Crusades were. And you have to go back in history and review it because there's a lot of mythology today around the Crusades.
Yeah, because back then everybody was fighting with machetes. Like now, only they fight with machetes. So they actually were doing pretty well. Nowadays, they got to steal weapons from us to shoot us with, or actually they don't have to steal them. They just have to like get the Obama administration's insiders to give them to them. But once they get them, they do quite a bit of damage. With Obama, it's the one thing that really actually gets him riled up. Like his whole time in the Senate, I believe the only time he even ever showed up to vote on the record was so he could do the double trouble law, which for those of you who don't know, if a doctor doesn't successfully complete an abortion or has a change of heart or something goes wrong where the baby actually fights for its life and looks like it's going to survive, to avoid any type of lapse of conscience and that doctor have a second, change of heart, that doctor exits, come in second doctor to finish the job and make sure that that baby does not survive. That's what he was in support of. You can't really find much else that he voted for. But even in the last couple of years, I think it was, hold on a second. I got an article here that was great. It was by a contributor on The Blaze talking about how Obama, you know what? I think this was actually Matt Walsh. I just want to read this real quick. He said, Obama earned a 100% grade from Planned Parenthood and NARAL, if I'm saying that right. In his crowning pro-choice moment, he opposed a bill to protect infants born alive during abortion. He was, and by all accounts is, in favor of executing infant children by decapitation or lethal injection if they managed to survive an abortion attempt. Any thought that he might have softened that position vanished during the Kermit Gosnell trial when he refused to categorically condemn and denounce what Gosnell did. And those are all cited instances. What is his deal with not wanting people to be punished with a baby?
Well, I mean, we could go on and on about President Obama's abortion record. He is the most pro-abortion president in American history. As a state senator, he voted 4 times against the Born Alive Infants Protection Act, which you referenced, TJ, which basically protects children who survive an abortion attempt from being slaughtered, as they're struggling for life on the delivery table or on the abortion table in the center. And this was his record, 4 times against the Born Alive Infants Protection Act as a state senator, and he went out of his way to combat it on the floor. And that is the record of the leader of the free world. And we tried to bring it up during his election cycles. A lot of people were completely unaware of it. Unfortunately, he continues to fund Planned Parenthood. He's spoken at Planned Parenthood events and said, God bless Planned Parenthood. He's been a huge supporter of the abortion industry. And
they're doing God's work. Weren't those his words? They're doing God's work.
He said, God bless them. And I mean, we could go on and on about Obama's insane pro-abortion record. Again, it's the most extreme. He is more extreme on abortion than Clinton ever was, and just how vigilantly he supported Planned Parenthood. And yet, keep in mind, we're dealing with a landscape that is riddled with people who are either vehemently and illogically, irrationally pro-abortion, or with folks who say that they're pro-life or seem to indicate that they're pro-life, and yet they're not actually addressing the cash flow, the government checks by the hundreds of millions that are sent to Planned Parenthood every year. And that's why it's so crucial that when we're talking about the 2016 election and we're looking at all these candidates and people are, crawling over themselves to give their statements about why they're trustworthy, we need to be really looking at, if you're talking about downsizing the government, cutting taxes, if you're talking about certain conservative policies, the first place to cut is Planned Parenthood spending. $500 million a year at Planned Parenthood, and if that's not in the immediate line of sight of a new, supposedly pro-life administration, then we have some very insincere and dangerous politicians that we're dealing with.
Let's go to the next tenet here that really fascinates me, and that's the race element. Because the reason I asked is Obama's fiercely supportive of this issue, and a lot of them he just couldn't care. He couldn't be bothered from leaving the golf course. And I get that. Like, being president's not really your thing. You're not taking well to it. It's boring, whatever. But abortion perks his interest. When it comes to the race element, it's weird to me because there are rumors that Barack Obama Sr. had encouraged some of his other kind of naive girlfriends that he, wooed into getting an abortion. There was one in particular in London that there's evidence he'd encouraged her to do that. So I'm thinking, here's a procedure that essentially has its roots in the eugenics mindset. It's focused on minorities, and your own father supposedly encouraged other women to get abortions, and you love it. I mean, that's him in a nutshell. Dreams from my father, who was my hero. He was a deadbeat dad, and I didn't realize it, and I still don't care. But when it comes to race in particular, and the stat of New York children, black children in New York being safer, the most dangerous place for a black child to be in the womb. And then you have Margaret Sanger, you have eugenics, you have your video on YouTube where you actually said that you were there to fund abortions of minorities. In my mind, if a white person steps out, if they're a cop and if they do something bad to a minority, if a politician says something bad about a minority, their career is potentially over. Their life is ruined. But if you're Planned Parenthood and you take money so that you can kill black kids, like nobody says anything. What is going on there? How screwed up is that?
Well, it's a great question. Dr. Alveda King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece, calls what Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry is doing to blacks in America black genocide, and that they're more dangerous than the Ku Klux Klan ever was, because blacks, the number one killer of blacks in our country today is abortion. And in places like New York City, the abortion rate for blacks is so high that a black baby is more likely to be aborted than he or she is to be born. The black abortion rate is 3 to 5 times as high as in the white community. And there's a reason for this. It's not just an accident. I mean, it's not just a result of, of chance. This is because the abortion industry and the government funding of it has been set up to control and limit the black community. And politicians have looked at the problems in the black community, and billionaires like Warren Buffett have looked at the problems of the black community and prescribed killing off children as a solution instead of education, instead of formation of family values, instead of disease prevention. Instead, it's abortion. Warren Buffett donated tens of millions of dollars in the last 6 years to Planned Parenthood specifically for low-income abortion, which largely ended up being minority abortion.
I think people would be surprised to hear that. I mean, Buffett has this reputation for not being a dirtbag, even though he does so many dirtbaggish things. Why? Tens of millions of dollars. And you think, why? What's in it for him to want to make sure minority kids particularly lose their lives?
I mean, there's a lot of speculation. Why does Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation want to sunset billions of dollars for controlling third world populations? Why does Warren Buffett invest tens of millions of dollars directly to pay for abortions at Planned Parenthood? And very few people think about this or talk about it. I mean, we could speak to racism, elitism, white supremacy. We could speak to a misguided sense of compassion. I mean, there's all kinds of motivations, and we don't know what's in the heart, but we can look at the statistics. And the statistics tell us that blacks are being exterminated in our country because of abortion. Black advocates like Dr. Alveda King, MLK's niece, are speaking out against it, but they're not getting any real attention or traction because it's so against the liberal elite mentality, which claims to speak for blacks in this country. And we also see the stories. I mean, folks like Tanya Reeves, a 24-year-old black girl in Chicago who Planned Parenthood, she has a 1-year-old son, Alvin. She goes to Planned Parenthood. They let her hemorrhage for 4 hours in their abortion clinic after an abortion, a botched abortion, and she dies within hours because Planned Parenthood wouldn't call the ambulance because they don't want to embarrass themselves with an ambulance out front. So the treatment of black women, obviously the treatment of black children, the investigations that we have done showing Planned Parenthood willing and ready to accept racist donations specifically to kill off black children, all of this should be enough to turn public opinion entirely against Planned Parenthood, but it's just a matter of getting the facts out there.
It really is interesting. I know that Tara was probably lied to along the way, but here's someone who went in there trusting them that they were going to do what's best for her, but never considering that if they're willing to take a couple $100s to exterminate her baby, probably not going to throw that big of a fuss if something happens to her. In fact, they might not even really call the police and get her the help she needs. Not really that important.
The fact is, that's a good point, too. The fact is that when you're an abortionist, like Kermit Gosnell and like many others we've investigated at Live Action, or you run an abortion chain at Planned Parenthood, for example, you're killing thousands of children a year, usually, at your facility. And the way you treat women is often going to be with the same abusive mentality that you're treating children. The abuse extends to women. We've documented this in other investigations. The cover-up of sexual abuse that's rampant at abortion clinics, the cover-up of statutory rape, the misinformation and manipulation of women in abortion clinics. Society at large is another matter about how women are treated who are pregnant, but talk about how they're treated in abortion clinics is sick. And this is because you dehumanize the child. It's not that far fetched to objectify and to abuse women.
Talk about your experience in the clinics. I know you don't go anymore because you're like internet famous and they'll see you coming a million miles away, but what are some of the things you saw that you didn't expect? What horrified you that maybe was beyond the level that you expected? Was it the fact that these and government workers, to a large degree, larger than the general population, are black? Right? I don't know what the percentage is, but you go in there, it's not like they're white women saying, yeah, we'll take your money if you want to focus strictly on black people. Like, to me, that's crazy. But what else about it surprised you, even past the extent you expected?
Well, a few things. First of all, my first few undercover visits at 18 years old as abortion clinics in Los Angeles near my school, UCLA at the time, and I posed as a statutory rape victim, and Planned Parenthood, the first two I went to immediately told me that they would lie about my age or cover up the statutory rape of my older boyfriend and give me a secret abortion. It was so immediate. It was so casual. It was so everyday that it was painful to witness because I just thought, of course, how many times is this happening every day with a real girl because of the way they seem to just have industry knowledge about how to cover up statutory rape and sexual abuse. And then other things. Going undercover into abortion clinics across the country, myself and teams at Live Action, and just seeing and witnessing just the casual horror that abortion workers treat the killing with. For example, walking through an abortion clinic and a woman vomiting in the hallway and the screams coming from another part of the clinic and the abortionist or the abortion workers just walking through the clinic as if it's business as usual, not even noticing the woman vomiting in the hallway. Things like that. There's this casual, grotesque disregard for life. And sometimes just walking around the hallway and seeing that in the attitudes of the staff beyond the abusive, illegal activities that are taking place in the waiting rooms or taking place in the actual abortion room, that's heartbreaking to witness. You
have to be willing to suspend disbelief. You have to be willing to ignore so many lies to buy into any of what's being spoon-fed. You were sitting there describing, it's kind of like the whole global warming thing. I had Alex Epstein on recently. We were talking about how hilarious it is that the weather they've had to change it to climate change now, of course, because global warming just isn't sticking. But, that was like a week before Boston got the all-time Guinness Book World Record of snowfall. As we're in this, we're 1 year inside of Al Gore's prediction that we're going to scorch to death. That's when people outside on the microphone and the podium describe women's health and all the wonderful things they do to treat women, ignoring the $1 billion in gross budget. And you're in there going, yeah, this place is a hole. It's a hellhole. This is a room of death. This is wonderful. This is what should be on camera.
Kermit Gosnell, exactly. And Kermit Gosnell ran that. His House of Horrors, which wasn't inspected for years in Philadelphia, despite reports and complaints. And he was literally chopping children's spinal cords and breaking them, snipping them, and then he was killing children who were born alive and leaving body parts in jars. I mean, all of that activity, which is horrific, you're not going to hear about it from politicians who are giving stump speeches practically for Planned Parenthood. But that's what's happening.
I feel like you're just being kind of like overly judgmental about Kermit. I mean, we don't know. We don't understand. You know, maybe it's circumstances early in life that made him the way he is. I don't think it's our place to pass any judgment on those things. I don't.
Well, we can we can never judge a person's motivation or intentions unless they, very publicly speak it and state it to our faces, because there's a lot of complicated reasons for why people might do horrible things. But we still have to call it for what it is. And for the sake of the victim, for justice for the victim, but also for the sake of the victimizer, for the aggressor. Because if we just say to women even, if we say to abortionists, hey, it's okay, this isn't killing, this is fine. Ethically, it's fine. It's not a human rights abuse. It's actually good for you. We're putting people into cycles. We're setting up people to be abusers. And that's not fair to women, to be miseducating them about the moral connotation and the physical, emotional, spiritual connotation of abortion for them. But that's the big lie of the abortion industry.
You know, it's funny. We talk a lot about human nature, and I joke, and it's in jest about judging, because I absolutely disagree. Like, I think the way that abortion is euphemized, not judging, is the same thing. Like, if you tell everyone not to judge, don't be shocked when they all exhibit bad judgment when it's time to make decisions. It's another lie. But the point is Kermit Gosnell is one of these people who, he is the sum of the parts. He is basically a projection of the behavior and the thoughts that he's been seasoned to do. So someone like, if someone's a porn addict and then they're a rapist, they go around looking at women and thinking, fantasizing about doing something terrible. Ditto bank robbers and murderers, and they get conditioned to that. So I often, when I really want to tick off my wife, I'll be like, imagine if we just had a baby who's like the most beautiful thing on planet Earth 4 months ago, and we have 3 boys now. And this totally changed it for me. I'm like, how could you be a grown adult, Barack Obama, with little girls and like be so in favor of something so amazingly cruel and inhumane? Let's get back to him. Like, if Kermit Gosnell walked in the house and said, hey, you want to see our baby? He would smile, but in the back of his mind, he'd be thinking, I bet I could snip that spine in one pull. Like, I bet I could do it in one squeeze. Like, he just would go around thinking, I'd kill that baby. I'd kill that baby. I could kill that one. That one's big, but I could handle that one. Like, how sick of a person he has to be. But yet, look at all the enablers. Look at all the people that for 10 years or whatever it was did nothing about this. Like, who's really sicker in the head? The people that you're fighting against that support this?
It's a great point. Exactly. It's a good point. I mean, the more responsibility you have, the more power you have, the more responsibility you have. Not to cheesily quote Spider-Man, but the greater knowledge you have, the more responsibility you have. So when you have folks, I mean, again, not to judge the heart, but you have to judge action. And the reality is every day, 3,000 times a day in our country, some abortionists, often with a history of sexual abuse or malpractice, is subjecting a woman to the most, what is truly, objectively speaking, a humiliating, disempowering, violent, and destructive act of abortion, slaughtering a child who had every opportunity, even in this fragile state, to make an impact on the world, but completely shutting off all that potential, completely shutting off all that beautiful potential. And that is happening legally, and it's funded by the government, over $500 million a year. I mean, if people just would hear this and share it and be willing to speak out, we can change this. And that's the message at Live Action, is it doesn't have to be this way. We're not doomed to abortion as a country. We can expose it. We can stand against it. But it takes, I'm grateful for you talking about it, TJ, because it takes people having the courage to talk about it.
I was thinking about some of the things I would like to see happen. Like, you've done more in your short time than I could ever do to promote the cause, the anti-death cause, as I call it. But I don't buy into the language war that we lose on our side to the liars. One of them is abortion. Like, people go, well, is it really a human, or is it conception? Obama, it's above his pay grade, which honestly, I think everything's above his pay grade, but that's a cop-out when everything you do says that you believe a certain way, to say it's above your pay grade. So I think let's just call it what it really is. I don't refer to it as abortion. If people aren't sure if it's a baby or not, I'm like, we can all agree it's one thing. It's your offspring. You're killing it. So you're killing your offspring. You're either pro for killing your own offspring or you're against it. So when people argue, well, it happens in the animal kingdom, as they do with some, political debates, I go, yeah, you know what else happens in the animal kingdom? They kill their offspring. Now, fortunately, we don't eat it. We haven't gotten that far yet, but you're in that camp and I'm in a different one. I don't believe in killing my offspring. So let's be honest about what it is, however developed the offspring might be. Another one is like just asking people, and I'd like to hear your tactics, but I think too many people get in these conversations and they cower or they don't know what to say, or they get backed into a corner because they're up against someone more experienced. And I think the easiest way is, and this is what people of this persuasion, this leftism do, is the simplest way to describe it is pro-life means what? Means you're for the baby. What's the opposite of life? They go, it's choice. The opposite of life is choice. We all know that. Even 5-year-olds know that. Wait a minute. It's not. That's not even close. So it's anti-death or it's anti-life. Those are the two parties or camps that you fall into. And it just drives me crazy. This girl on the street, oh, I'm pro-choice. I'm like, hey, what does that even mean? That doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. Like, that's a way to massage the meaning of the actual word. That's linguistic warfare, and I hate it. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's the only way you can defend abortion is by trying to put the word choice on it. But that's just a euphemism for killing a child. And I mean, at the end of the day, these, of course, are semantics that are used. Like you said, abortion, even the most diehard, in denial, pro-abortion advocate admits that you have to kill in order to successfully complete an abortion, that it is some sort of life. They might dare to go against science and reason and claim it's not human, it's not a human life, or they might say that the kind of contradictory phrase that it's a potential life, but they still call it a life. And that's where we always win every debate on the pro-life side, because logic, because reason, science is in our camp. This is a human life, not a life of potential. It is a life, completely unique, individual human being that just needs time and nourishment to grow, to become an adult one day, if you don't interrupt and destroy that life before it can reach full maturation.
Yeah, and that's why I go, okay, take the spirituality and the God, the moral part of it out. It's your offspring, and you chose to kill it. I mean, that's cool. There's been times in our society when we've hit bottom and like people have sacrificed their own children, but at least they did it to God's. Like sacrificing the child for your own selfish. What did I have here? I have one of the best articles I've ever read. I know we're running out of time, so I want to touch on this to see if you've actually heard this. It's called The Scar on My Soul, and it was like 2 years ago on American Thinker, I think. Did you ever see this article, Lila?
I don't think so.
There was a guy who, they had gone to in vitro to have a child, and they ended up getting triplets. And the wife couldn't handle it. She didn't want to have triplets. She just wanted one.
Yeah.
This was one of the first articles I ever read where I stopped, I looked up like, oh my gosh, I think I'm crying. Yeah, I have tears in my eyes. This is insane. And I was like halfway done. And he talks about this experience of her not wanting to have more than one child and him being forced into accepting this decision to not carry on with 2 of the 3. And he goes through the lies that the doctor told him. His wife didn't want to watch the procedure, but he had to. And there's one part of this I want to read where he says, "Let nobody fool you. It is not painless for the child. Anyone who says otherwise is a liar." That's a common theme here. "Abortion is not an excision of a featureless bunch of cells. It's infanticide. We have revived the practice of child sacrifice to the new deities of casual sex and convenience. We rationalize the reality of murder by altering our perspective of the nascent life through euphemisms like fetus or descriptions of a clump of cells, just like the Nazis convinced themselves that the people screaming as they were shot or gassed were Untermenschen, subhuman, and therefore guiltlessly exterminated." Now, I want to ask you, if people are involved, if they want to learn more, if they want to get involved, if they want to find out more about what you're doing, where should they go? What should they do?
Please check out our website. It's liveaction.org. We're on Facebook and Twitter. I'm Lila Grace Rose on Twitter. We're Live Action on Facebook. We have the biggest social media platform for the pro-life movement. We have a news website, Live Action News, to connect with us. And on our website, liveaction.org, if you've been hurt by an abortion, maybe there's one in your history, maybe you were involved in one, and you haven't felt like you've healed from it. Maybe it's still something that's buried in your past, but there are resources on our site to connect you with places for healing, because that's half the battle here, is to get the folks that have been involved with abortion to experience the healing that they need. Our country is deeply wounded. People are deeply wounded by this. So please check out liveaction.org. On the resources page, it'll connect you to groups like Rachel's Vineyard, Silent No More, which have healing ministries for those hurt by abortion.
I want to thank you, Lila, for what you're doing, for contributing to the cause. And I want to let people know that if I was too harsh, and we didn't talk much about the victims and the women that are punished emotionally, physically, the women that take their own lives, the women that suffer with this forever. And my anger's kindled at those who lied to them and deceived them and got them to do something they otherwise wouldn't have done had they known the truth. So I thank you for what you're doing, and I hope for the best for you, and hopefully we can do whatever we can to help the cause. So thank you for doing your part, and thank you for coming on tonight.
Thanks so much, TJ. Thanks for having me on.
You're listening to the absolute unadulterated truth, courtesy of the Oh Hail Yeah Show. Want more? Oh. Hail yeah, you do.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to the Young Cons podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud. And make sure to check us out online at youngcons.com/podcast. Or chat us up on Twitter at RealTJHale.
But I'm a big fan of money. I like it. I use it. I have a little. I keep it in a jar on top of my refrigerator. I'd like to put more in that jar. That's where you come in.